I once watched a woman sit in my office, tears streaming down her face, and she said something I'll never forget. She said, "Dr. Murphy, I've been praying for years. I've been trying so hard. I've been begging, pleading, hoping, and nothing changes. What am I doing wrong?" And I looked at her with all the love in my heart and I said, "My dear, you're not doing anything wrong. You're simply thinking from the problem instead of from the solution. The moment you shift that one thing, everything in your entire life will align." She looked at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. But 3 months later, she came back, and she was radiant. She told me, "I finally understand. The moment I stopped thinking I need this thing to happen, and started thinking as if it already had happened, my whole world rearranged itself." That's what I want to share with you today, and I promise you, if you truly hear what I'm about to say, your life will never be the same. You see, most people are walking through life completely backwards. They're waiting for the outside world to change so they can feel different on the inside. They're saying, "When I get the money, then I'll feel abundant. When I find love, then I'll feel worthy. When my health improves, then I'll feel peace." But this is the great cosmic joke, the divine reversal that most never discover. It doesn't work that way. It has never worked that way. It cannot work that way because the universe operates on one fundamental principle that governs absolutely everything, and that principle is this: your inner world creates your outer world, not the other way around. Your thoughts, your feelings, your assumptions about yourself and your life, these are the seeds, and the circumstances you see around you, they're just the harvest. Now I know what you might be thinking. You might be saying, "But Dr. Murphy, you don't understand my situation. My problems are real. My bills are real. My pain is real." And I'm not here to tell you that what you're experiencing isn't real in your current perception. What I am here to tell you is that your current perception is not the only reality available to you. There are infinite versions of your life existing right now in the quantum field of possibility, and the one you experience is determined entirely by the mental state you occupy most consistently. Think of it this way. Right now, there are people living in circumstances far more challenging than yours who wake up every morning with joy in their hearts. And there are people living in circumstances far more comfortable than yours who wake up every morning consumed by misery and dread. The external situation is not the determining factor. The internal state is everything. I once knew a woman, I'll call her Elizabeth, who came to me absolutely shattered. She had been in chronic pain for 7 years. Doctors couldn't find the cause. She'd spent tens of thousands of dollars on treatments, specialists, experimental procedures. Nothing worked. She told me, "I've tried everything. This is just my reality now." And I said to her, "What I'm saying to you? No, this is just the reality you've been mentally accepting as permanent." She was angry with me at first. She thought I was dismissing her suffering, but I wasn't. I was offering her the key to her prison cell. Here's what we did. We didn't focus on the pain at all. We focused on the feeling of the wish fulfilled. I asked her, "If you woke up tomorrow completely free from this pain, what would you do first? How would you feel? What would you think about throughout the day?" She closed her eyes and described it to me. The lightness in her body, the freedom of movement, the joy of planning activities she'd given up on, the relief of not having pain be the first thing she thought about when she woke up. And then I gave her the only instruction that matters. Live from that state now. Not when the pain is gone. Now. She looked at me like I was insane, but she was desperate enough to try. Every morning, before she even opened her eyes, she would feel into that state of freedom. She would imagine herself moving through her day pain-free. She would thank her body for its strength and healing. She stopped talking about her pain constantly. She stopped identifying as someone with chronic pain. She stopped reading forums and articles that reinforced the permanence of her condition. Within 3 weeks, the pain began to diminish. Within 3 months, it was completely gone. Now, was it a miracle? No, it was a shift in consciousness. She stopped feeding the mental state that produced pain and began feeding the mental state that produces health. And that's the secret most people miss. They're waiting for their body to change before they change their mind. But that's backward. The mind is cause, the body is effect. Your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't say, "Well, I don't think that's true." It simply accepts what you consistently impress upon it, and begins to manifest that as your reality. This is why affirmations work, not because they're magic words, but because they redirect the stream of consciousness. When you say, I am healthy, whole, and radiant, you're not lying to yourself. You're choosing which state of consciousness to occupy. And here's what's fascinating. Your body doesn't know the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. Scientists have proven this. When you imagine biting into a lemon, your mouth waters. When you imagine being chased, your heart rate increases. The body responds to the images held in mind. So when you repeatedly imagine yourself well, when you feel the feeling of health, when you see yourself moving freely and joyfully, your subconscious begins to accept that as the dominant impression, and the life force within you, that infinite intelligence that heals cuts and mends bones without your conscious effort, begins to conform your body to that image. I once knew a man who was told he'd never walk without a cane. The doctors were certain, the x-rays were clear, but this man understood something the doctors didn't, that consciousness precedes condition. Every night before sleep, he would enter a drowsy, peaceful state and imagine himself hiking in the mountains, feeling the strength in his legs, the ease in his stride. He didn't fight against the current reality. He didn't resist the pain. He simply gave more attention to the desired reality. Within months, he was walking normally. The doctors called it spontaneous improvement. He called it the natural result of impressing his subconscious with a new pattern. The subconscious doesn't understand medical impossibility. It only understands the images you persistently feed it. This is why two people with identical diagnoses can have completely different outcomes. One person accepts the diagnosis as their final reality. The other person accepts the diagnosis as current information, but refuses to accept it as their permanent condition. I've watched this pattern repeat itself countless times. A woman told her subconscious mind every night before sleep that her body knew how to heal itself, that every cell was being renewed in perfect health. She didn't argue with her doctors. She didn't fight against the diagnosis. She simply impressed a different pattern onto her subconscious mind. 6 months later, her doctors were baffled by the remission they witnessed. Your subconscious mind is completely neutral. It will accept whatever you habitually think and feel as true. If you constantly think about your limitations, your body will manifest those limitations. If you constantly think about your vitality and strength, your body will find ways to express that vitality and strength. This isn't positive thinking. This is understanding how the creative mechanism within you operates. Your subconscious mind is like soil. It doesn't care what you plant. Plant thorns, you get thorns. Plant roses, you get roses. It accepts all seeds equally and brings forth after their kind. Most people plant seeds of limitation all day long without realizing it. I always get sick this time of year. I'm just not a morning person. I have a weak back. My memory is terrible. Each of these statements is a seed planted in the subconscious. And the subconscious, being the perfect servant, begins to manifest conditions that match these beliefs. The moment you understand this, everything changes. You become careful about what you say about yourself. You become selective about the thoughts you entertain. You realize that every statement you make about yourself is a command to your subconscious mind to make it so. And here's where it gets fascinating. Your subconscious doesn't argue. It doesn't say, "Are you sure about that?" It simply accepts. When you declare, "I'm terrible with money," your subconscious says, "Understood. Let me create circumstances that prove this true." When you say, "I always get sick in winter," your subconscious mobilizes to fulfill that expectation. But the opposite is equally true. When you affirm, "I am healthy and strong," your subconscious begins orchestrating that reality. When you state, "Money flows to me easily," it starts recognizing opportunities you've been blind to all along. Think of your subconscious as the most loyal servant you've ever had. It never questions your orders. It never takes a day off. It works tirelessly day and night to manifest whatever you've impressed upon it. The question is, what orders are you giving? Most people are unknowingly programming themselves for limitation. They wake up and immediately begin the ritual of negative affirmation. "I'm so tired. This is going to be a tough day. I can't catch a break." Each statement is a seed planted in the fertile soil of the subconscious mind. And your subconscious? It's the world's most efficient gardener. It waters those seeds. It gives them sunlight. It nurtures them until they break through the soil of your experience as full-grown reality. I've watched this principle transform lives. A woman came to me once, convinced she was unlucky in love. Every relationship ended badly, every man disappointed her. She had a catalog of evidence spanning 20 years. But when we examined her mental diet, we discovered she repeated this story daily to friends, to herself, even to strangers. She had become the author and publisher of her own misfortune. We changed one thing, her inner dialogue. Instead of "I'm unlucky in love," she began affirming, "I am worthy of a loving, respectful relationship. The right partner is being drawn to me now." She felt foolish at first. The words seemed empty, contradicted by years of evidence. But she persisted. And within months, her entire relational landscape shifted. Not through magic, but through the reorganization of her subconscious expectations. She stopped attracting the same type of unavailable man because she was no longer broadcasting that frequency. The subconscious doesn't deal in subtleties or exceptions, it responds to the dominant impression you hold. If you say, "I want love," but feel, "I'm unworthy of it," the feeling wins every time. Your words are the surface ripples. Your feelings are the ocean current beneath. This is why affirmations without emotional conviction fall flat. You can repeat, "I am confident" 1,000 times while your body language screams insecurity, and nothing changes. The subconscious reads the total message, not just the verbal component. So how do we reprogram effectively? You must marry thought with feeling. You must imagine the desired outcome with such sensory richness that your subconscious accepts it as real, not as wishful thinking, as reality. Joseph Murphy taught the technique of entering a drowsy, relaxed state before sleep. In this hypnagogic threshold, the critical faculty of the conscious mind loosens its grip, the gateway to the subconscious swings open. This is when suggestions bypass the skeptical gatekeeper and sink directly into the fertile soil of the deeper mind. Before sleep, you don't fight your way into belief. You gently assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. If you desire confidence, you don't beg for it. You feel yourself moving through the world with quiet assurance. You see people responding to you with respect. You feel the calm centeredness in your chest, the steadiness in your voice. You live it in imagination with such vividness that your subconscious cannot distinguish it from waking experience. And because the subconscious is the builder of your reality, it begins to externalize what you've internally accepted. I know a man who struggled with public speaking for years. His subconscious held a brutal script. You'll freeze, they'll judge you, you'll humiliate yourself. Every presentation was torture. He'd prepare meticulously, only to have his mind go blank under the spotlight. Then he began a nightly practice. Before sleep, he'd replay the scene differently. He'd imagine walking onto the stage feeling grounded. He'd see himself speaking clearly, making eye contact, hearing the audience engaged. He'd feel the warmth of connection, the satisfaction of delivering value. And here's what happened. Within 2 weeks, his manager asked him to present a quarterly update to the leadership team. A test. A small stage, but a stage nonetheless. Most people in his position would have spiraled, would have seen it as a threat. But he didn't, because his subconscious had already rehearsed this moment dozens of times. When he stood in front of that room, something remarkable occurred. His body knew what to do. His voice was steady, not perfect, but present. Real. 6 months later, he was leading workshops for new hires. A year after that, he spoke at an industry conference, not because he suddenly became fearless, but because he'd reprogrammed the deeper software running beneath his conscious awareness. This is the power of the subconscious mind when you work with it intentionally, consistently, and with emotional conviction. Now, let's get practical. Because understanding these principles intellectually means nothing if you don't apply them. And I want to give you a simple framework you can start using tonight, before you fall asleep. The first step is to get clear on what you actually want, and I mean crystal clear, not vague wishes. Not, "I want to be successful" or "I want to be happy." Those are too abstract for your subconscious to work with effectively. Your subconscious thinks in images, sensations, and feelings. It needs specificity, it needs texture. So instead of, "I want to be successful," you might say, "I am confidently leading my team through complex projects, earning recognition for my strategic thinking, and receiving the promotion I deserve." See the difference? One is a cloud of possibility, the other is a concrete destination your subconscious can navigate toward. Write it down. Use present tense, as if it's already true. I am, not I will be. This signals to your subconscious that this is your current reality, not some distant future hope. And feel into it as you write. Let the emotions rise: excitement, gratitude, satisfaction, relief, whatever naturally comes when you imagine this desire fulfilled. The second step happens at night, right before sleep. This is your golden window. Your conscious mind is tired, its defenses are down, and your subconscious is most receptive. Lie in bed, close your eyes, and bring your desire to mind, but don't strain, don't force. Gently visualize the end result. See yourself living in that reality. What do you see around you? Who's there? What are you doing? Feel every sensation as intensely real. The temperature of the room, the fabric against your skin, the sounds filling the space. The more vivid your imagination, the more powerfully your subconscious responds. You see, your subconscious mind cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. That's not metaphor. That's neurological fact. When you imagine something with emotional intensity and sensory detail, your brain fires the same neural pathways as if the event were actually happening. This is why athletes visualize their performance before competition. Why surgeons mentally rehearse complex procedures. Why successful people run mental movies of their desired outcomes before they manifest physically. I remember working with a woman who was terrified of public speaking. She had a presentation coming up that could make or break her career. Instead of focusing on her fear, I taught her this technique. Every night for 2 weeks she sat quietly and imagined herself on that stage. She felt the confidence in her posture. She heard her voice steady and strong. She saw the audience nodding, engaged, responding positively. She felt the satisfaction of finishing successfully. When the actual day arrived, something remarkable happened. Her subconscious mind recognized the situation. It had been there before, hundreds of times in her imagination. The nervousness was there, yes, but underneath it was a deeper knowing, a familiarity. Her subconscious guided her through because it had already experienced this success. She told me later it felt like déjà vu, like she was simply remembering something that had already happened rather than doing something new. That's the power you're working with here. You're not just daydreaming, you're not just hoping. You're actually training your subconscious mind, creating neural pathways, establishing new patterns of response. Think about it like learning to drive. When you first got behind the wheel, you had to consciously think about every single movement. Check the mirror, signal, turn the wheel, apply the brake. It was exhausting, wasn't it? But now you drive without even thinking about it. You can hold a conversation, listen to music, plan your day, all while navigating traffic. That's because those actions have been programmed into your subconscious mind through repetition. The same principle applies to your thinking patterns. Right now, worry might be automatic for you. Doubt might be your default setting. But through conscious, deliberate repetition of new thoughts, you can reprogram those automatic responses. You can make confidence your default. You can make expectation of good your automatic reaction. This is why affirmations work, but only when done correctly. It's not about mindlessly repeating words you don't believe. It's about choosing statements that resonate with you, that feel possible to you, and repeating them in a relaxed, receptive state until they become part of your subconscious programming. You're not trying to force belief. You're gently introducing new possibilities to your subconscious mind and allowing them to take root. Here's something most people get wrong. They try to jump too far too fast. If you're struggling with money and you start affirming, "I'm a millionaire," your conscious mind immediately rejects it. It knows it's not true, and that resistance creates a block. Instead, start with something your mind can accept. "I'm becoming more financially stable every day. I'm open to receiving abundance. Money flows to me in expected and unexpected ways. These feel possible. They don't trigger resistance." And as your circumstances begin to shift, as evidence starts to accumulate, you can expand your affirmations accordingly. This is what Joseph Murphy called mental equivalence. You don't need to match the exact vibration of $1 million if you've never experienced it. You need to match the vibration of progress, of improvement, of movement in the right direction. And that vibration is accessible to you right now, regardless of your current circumstances. Think of it like climbing a ladder. You don't teleport from the ground to the top rung. You take it one step at a time. Each step feels stable because you're only moving incrementally. Your nervous system can handle it. Your belief system can accommodate it. And before you know it, you're standing somewhere you never thought possible, looking back at how far you've climbed. This gradual approach also protects you from what I call manifestation whiplash. I've seen people who suddenly came into money, whether through inheritance, lottery, or a business windfall, only to lose it all within months or years. Why? Because their internal thermostat hadn't been adjusted. Their subconscious blueprint still said, "I'm someone who struggles with money," so they unconsciously sabotaged themselves until their external reality matched their internal identity once again. The Joseph Murphy method builds sustainable transformation because it rewires you from the inside out. By the time financial abundance shows up in your life, you're already the person who can handle it, maintain it, and grow it. Your identity has evolved. Your self-concept has expanded. The wealth isn't something foreign that happened to you, it's a natural reflection of who you've become. Now, let's address the timeline question because I know it's on your mind. How long will this take? And honestly, there's no universal answer. I've witnessed people experience shifts within days, others within months. Murphy himself documented cases where financial transformation happened seemingly overnight, and others where it unfolded over years. But here's what I've observed. The timeline matters far less than the consistency. Someone who practices these principles daily for 30 days will see more change than someone who practices intensely for 3 days and then abandons it for weeks. Think of it like learning to play an instrument. You don't expect to master the piano after a single intensive practice session. The person who sits down for 15 minutes every single day will inevitably surpass the person who practices for 5 hours one weekend and then ignores the piano for a month. Your subconscious mind responds to repetition, to gentle persistence, to the steady rhythm of belief repeated day after day. I want to share something that might surprise you. Some of the most profound transformations I've witnessed came from people who weren't naturally optimistic or particularly spiritual. They were skeptics who simply decided to test these principles with scientific rigor. They treated their mental diet like an experiment, carefully controlling their thoughts and observing the results without attachment to any particular outcome. And you know what happened? The universe doesn't care whether you believe from faith or from curiosity. It responds to the mental equivalent you persistently hold. I knew a man, an engineer by training, deeply analytical, who approached Murphy's teachings with complete skepticism. But he was also desperate. His business was failing, his marriage was strained, and nothing seemed to work. He told himself, "I'll give this exactly 90 days. I'll follow the instructions precisely, track my mental state, and document any changes." He created a spreadsheet. He logged his affirmations, his visualization sessions, his moments of doubt. He approached reprogramming his subconscious the way he'd approached debugging a complex system. 90 days later, his business hadn't just stabilized, it had doubled its revenue. But here's what fascinated him most. He couldn't identify a single dramatic external event that caused the shift. Instead, he noticed 1,000 tiny changes in his behavior, his decisions, his energy, his interactions with clients. He started returning calls he would have avoided. He pursued opportunities he would have dismissed as unlikely. He had conversations with a confidence that wasn't forced but simply natural. The transformation happened so gradually that he couldn't pinpoint when things turned around. But when he reviewed his spreadsheet after those 90 days, the data was undeniable. This skeptical engineer became one of the most passionate advocates for these principles I've ever met, precisely because he approached it without mysticism, without wishful thinking, just pure consistent application. His story reveals something fundamental about how consciousness operates in the material world. You don't need blind faith. You don't need to suppress your analytical mind. In fact, your rational faculties, when properly aligned with these principles, become the very mechanism through which transformation occurs. But here's what trips most people up, and I want you to hear this clearly because it might be the difference between your success and continued struggle. People confuse repetition with persistence. They think that saying something once counts as planting a seed. They expect instant germination, and when nothing sprouts within 48 hours, they conclude the soil is barren. Let me tell you about soil for a moment. A farmer doesn't plant a seed and then dig it up every morning to check if it's growing. He doesn't stand over the field, hands on hips, complaining that nothing's happening. He plants, he waters, he trusts the process, and he moves forward with his life knowing that beneath the surface, invisible forces are already at work. Your subconscious mind operates exactly like that soil. When you plant an impression through relaxed, feeling-infused repetition, you're not creating something from nothing. You're activating a law as reliable as gravity, as consistent as the changing seasons. The soil doesn't question whether it should grow the seed. It simply does what soil does. It accepts what's planted and brings forth after its kind. Now I can already hear some of you thinking, but Joseph, I've tried affirmations, I've repeated things until I'm blue in the face, nothing changed. And I'm going to tell you exactly why that happened. You were speaking words while your feeling nature contradicted every syllable. You were saying, I am prosperous while feeling poor. You were declaring, I am confident, while your emotional body trembled with insecurity. This is the hidden tragedy that plays out in countless lives every single day. And this is precisely why I'm sharing this ancient truth with you now, because once you understand this principle, once you truly grasp how this mechanism works, everything changes. Let me take you deeper into this revelation, because what I'm about to share will fundamentally alter how you approach every desire, every goal, every aspiration you hold. The subconscious mind doesn't understand English, Spanish, French, or any spoken language. It doesn't process words the way your conscious mind does. The subconscious mind speaks one language and one language only, the language of feeling, the language of emotion, the language of vivid mental imagery charged with conviction. When you say words without feeling, you're essentially speaking a foreign language to your subconscious. You might as well be reading a telephone directory. The words pass through without leaving any impression, without creating any change, without activating the creative forces within you. But when you feel something deeply, when emotion saturates your mental imagery, when your entire being resonates with a particular state of consciousness, that's when the subconscious mind springs into action. That's when the invisible forces begin to rearrange circumstances, to orchestrate events, to draw into your experience the physical equivalent of your inner state. Think of your subconscious as a garden. The feeling-toned thoughts are seeds. Now, you can stand in that garden all day long, talking about tomatoes, describing tomatoes, making affirmations about tomatoes. But if you never actually plant a tomato seed, if you never impress the soil with the actual seed itself, no tomatoes will grow. The feeling is the seed. The emotion is what makes the impression. The internal experience of already having what you desire, that's what plants the idea deep in the fertile soil of your subconscious mind. And here's what most people miss. They try to force the feeling. They strain. They clench their fists and grit their teeth and try to manufacture emotion through sheer willpower. That's not how it works. The feeling must be natural. It must be easy. Think about it when you remember something beautiful from your past. Do you have to force yourself to feel good about it? No. The feeling arises naturally because the memory is real to you. That's exactly how you must approach your desire. Make it so real in your imagination that the feeling comes naturally. Don't try to whip up emotion. Don't try to perform for the universe. Simply dwell in the reality of your wish fulfilled until the feeling flows naturally from that dwelling. I've seen people spend hours in meditation, straining to feel abundant, trying to force gratitude, attempting to manufacture joy, and they wonder why nothing changes. Because the subconscious knows the difference between authentic feeling and theatrical performance. Your subconscious mind responds to sincerity. It responds to the quiet, natural feeling that comes from genuine belief. Not the loud, forced affirmations, not the desperate, grasping emotions, but the calm, natural acceptance of your desire as already accomplished. Let me give you a practical example. Say you want to manifest a new home. Most people will sit down, close their eyes, and try to feel happy about a house they don't have. They'll strain to feel grateful for walls they've never touched and rooms they've never walked through. But the person who understands this principle does something different. They don't try to force anything. Instead, they gently imagine themselves in that home. They see the morning light coming through the window. They feel the texture of the doorknob as they enter. They hear the sound of their footsteps on the floor. And as they dwell in this scene, as they make it vivid and real in their imagination, the feeling comes naturally, not a forced feeling, not theatrical gratitude, but a quiet, natural sense of satisfaction. The same feeling you'd have if you walked into your actual home right now. That's the feeling that impresses the subconscious. That's the seed that grows. Don't try to manufacture the feeling. Don't force it. Just assume it's already done. That's all assumption is, living from the end result as if it's accomplished fact. You know what most people do? They treat their desire like it's somewhere out there in the future, always just out of reach. They say, I want to be successful, and what they're really affirming is the wanting, the lack, the distance between where they are and where they want to be. But when you assume the wish fulfilled, you collapse that distance. You don't hope for it, you don't wish for it, you don't even pray for it in the traditional sense. You simply accept that it's done. The decision has been made in consciousness. The invisible realm has already arranged the circumstances. Think about how you feel about things that are already certain in your life. You don't doubt that the sun will rise tomorrow. You don't worry about whether gravity will work. You don't question whether your name is your name. These things are assumed, they're settled. There's no emotional charge around them because they're simply facts of your reality. That's the state you need to cultivate around your desire. Not excitement, not desperation, not even hope, just quiet assumption. The way you assume your bed will be in your bedroom when you go to sleep tonight. You don't check. You don't verify. You just know. This is what Scripture means when it says, "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." Not believe that you will receive it, believe that you have received it. Present tense. Already done. Your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between an imagined experience that's vividly felt and a real experience. This is scientifically demonstrable. Athletes who visualize their performance activate the same neural pathways as those who physically practice. Your nervous system responds to imagination as if it were reality. So when you imagine your wish fulfilled, when you hear the congratulations, feel the embrace, see the evidence of your success, your subconscious accepts this as fact and begins to restructure your world accordingly. This is why the method works with such stunning consistency. You're not trying to manipulate external reality through willpower alone. You're impressing upon the creative medium within you, the subconscious mind that never sleeps, never doubts, never questions. It simply accepts and expresses. Think of a woman who wanted to heal a damaged relationship with her sister. They hadn't spoken in 3 years. The hurt ran deep. Instead of rehearsing arguments or dwelling on past wounds, she practiced feeling the wish fulfilled. Every night before sleep, she imagined receiving a warm phone call from her sister. She felt the relief flooding through her body. She heard the laughter they used to share. She saw them meeting for coffee, the awkwardness melting into genuine connection. She didn't know how it would happen. She didn't plot or scheme. She simply lived in the feeling of the relationship restored. Within 2 months, her sister reached out. The reconciliation that seemed impossible became inevitable, not through force, but through the silent rearrangement that occurs when you change your inner state. This is the secret that mystics have known throughout the ages but expressed in symbolic language. When they spoke of faith moving mountains, they weren't referring to blind belief in something external. They meant the unwavering assumption of your wish already fulfilled. Faith, in this context, is the feeling of certainty that what you've claimed in imagination must harden into fact. You see, most people practice the exact opposite. They imagine what they don't want with perfect clarity and feeling. They visualize failure. They rehearse arguments. They imagine catastrophic scenarios with such vividness that their subconscious has no choice but to produce matching conditions. Then they wonder why their life reflects their fears rather than their hopes. This is the tragedy of mental mismanagement, not because the mind is weak, but because it's so incredibly powerful that even misguided thoughts produce results. Your subconscious doesn't judge whether your dominant thoughts are beneficial or harmful. It simply accepts them as instructions and works tirelessly to manifest corresponding conditions in your outer world. I've witnessed this principle in action countless times. A talented professional repeatedly visualizes being overlooked for promotions, imagining the disappointment, feeling the sting of rejection before it even happens. And sure enough, when promotion time arrives, they're passed over. Not because they lacked ability, but because their mental rehearsal of failure programmed their subconscious to sabotage their own performance in subtle ways: diminished confidence, hesitant communication, unconscious withdrawal from opportunities. Contrast this with someone who mentally rehearses success. They see themselves speaking confidently in meetings. They feel the satisfaction of completed projects. They imagine their supervisor's recognition. Their subconscious receives entirely different instructions and consequently produces entirely different behaviors and attracts entirely different opportunities. The mechanism is identical in both cases, only the direction changes. This is what Murphy understood that so many miss. Your mind doesn't need to be fixed or healed. It needs to be properly directed. It's already working perfectly. The question is, toward what end are you directing it? Consider how this applies to relationships. Someone enters a new friendship or romance carrying memories of past betrayals. They scan constantly for signs of deception. They interpret innocent actions through a lens of suspicion. They mentally rehearse confrontations that haven't happened yet. What does their subconscious do with these instructions? It creates tension, defensiveness, and behaviors that actually push the other person away, creating the very abandonment they feared. This is the tragedy of unconscious creation. When you don't deliberately direct your subconscious mind, it doesn't sit idle. It takes whatever thoughts you repetitively feed it and works tirelessly to make them real. It doesn't judge. It doesn't protect you from yourself. It simply creates. I want you to understand something profound here. Your subconscious mind is the most powerful creative force in your personal universe, and it's operating 24 hours a day. While you sleep, while you eat, while you're watching television, your subconscious is busy coordinating millions of processes, attracting circumstances, and shaping your reality according to the dominant patterns you've impressed upon it. When those patterns are fear-based, your subconscious becomes a manufacturer of crisis. When those patterns are rooted in unworthiness, it becomes an architect of limitation. But here's what changes everything. The moment you consciously choose different thoughts and persist in them, your subconscious begins creating from that new blueprint instead. Think about the person who constantly worries about their health. Every headache is a brain tumor. Every cough is pneumonia. Every strange sensation is the beginning of some catastrophic illness. They research symptoms online, feeding their mind worst-case scenarios. They lie awake at night, scanning their body for problems, finding evidence everywhere they look because attention magnifies experience. What happens to such a person over time? Their body responds to the chronic stress. Their immune system weakens from the constant flood of stress hormones. They develop real symptoms, real conditions, and when they do, they say, "See, I knew something was wrong." And here's what's tragic about this. They're not wrong that something is wrong. Something times is times wrong. But what's wrong isn't what they think is wrong. The problem isn't their body. The problem is the belief system that's been attacking their body from within. This is the cruel irony of health anxiety. The fear of illness becomes the very mechanism that creates illness, not because the fear is justified, but because the fear itself is destructive. Your body cannot distinguish between a real threat and an imagined one. When you live in constant fear of disease, your body responds as if the disease is already present. I've watched this pattern destroy lives. A woman convinced she had multiple sclerosis because she experienced occasional numbness in her hands. She spent 3 years going from specialist to specialist. Every test came back normal. Every neurological exam showed nothing. But she couldn't accept it. She was certain they were missing something. And during those 3 years of constant anxiety and hypervigilance, she developed chronic pain, insomnia, digestive issues, and depression. The very symptoms she feared became her reality, not because she had the disease she imagined, but because the fear itself was the disease. This is what Joseph Murphy tried to make people understand. Your subconscious mind is not a passive recorder of reality, it's an active creator of your experience. Whatever you habitually think about yourself becomes your reality. If you think about yourself as sick, as vulnerable, as damaged, your subconscious mind will work tirelessly to make that image real, and the medical system, with all its good intentions, can sometimes feed this pattern. Every test ordered confirms your belief that there might be something to find. Every specialist referral validates your concern that something is seriously wrong. The system is designed to find disease, so when you enter it looking for disease, you're entering a machine specifically built to confirm your fears. And the tragic irony is that this process itself creates the very symptoms you fear. The anxiety of waiting for test results produces chest tightness. The stress of medical appointments triggers digestive issues. The fear of diagnosis creates tension headaches. You came in with phantom symptoms created by health anxiety, and you leave with real physical symptoms created by the diagnostic process itself. I watched this happen to a woman who went to her doctor with occasional heart palpitations, something that happens to everyone during stress or after caffeine. But instead of reassurance, she got an EKG, then a stress test, then a Holter monitor, then a referral to a cardiologist. Each test came back normal, but instead of relief, she felt more convinced something was being missed. The process of investigation had validated her fear as legitimate. 6 months and 12 appointments later, she was having daily panic attacks, her heart racing constantly, not from disease, but from the terror the medical system had amplified. Here's what nobody tells you. For people with health anxiety, a clean bill of health is never clean enough. A normal test result doesn't bring relief, it brings suspicion. Maybe they missed something. Maybe I need a second opinion. Maybe this doctor isn't thorough enough. The goal keeps moving because the real problem isn't in your body, it's in your mind's relationship with your body. And doctors, bless them, don't know how to handle this. They're trained to investigate symptoms, not to recognize when the investigation itself is the problem. They're trained to rule out disease, not to understand that for the anxious mind, nothing can ever be fully ruled out. So they order more tests, another blood panel, another scan, another referral, and each time you feel a momentary relief. Finally, they're taking me seriously, followed by the crushing return of fear when everything comes back normal again. Because here's what nobody tells you. In the kingdom of health anxiety, good news is never good enough. A clear test result doesn't bring peace. It brings a new question. But what if they missed something? What if this test wasn't sensitive enough? What if the disease is so rare that this particular test wouldn't catch it? You start researching the sensitivity and specificity of medical tests. You learn about false negatives. You discover that no test is 100% accurate. And this knowledge, which might reassure a calm mind, becomes ammunition for your anxiety. The MRI was clear, but MRIs can miss small tumors in early stages. My blood work was normal, but some cancers don't show up in blood work until they're advanced. The doctor said I'm fine, but doctors make mistakes. Medical errors are the third leading cause of death. Do you see what's happening? Your mind has become so skilled at generating fear that it can turn any piece of information, even positive information, into evidence of danger. This is the supreme tragedy of health anxiety. The very thing you're seeking reassurance, certainty, proof that you're okay, is the thing that keeps you trapped. Because the anxious mind cannot be reassured. Not really. Not for long. You can have every test known to medicine. You can see 10 different specialists. You can get second opinions, and third opinions, and expert consultations from the best hospitals in the world. And still, within hours or days, the doubt creeps back in. But what about this other symptom I just noticed? What if something has changed since that test? What if there's a condition so rare that even these experts don't know about it? The peace you're seeking cannot be found through external validation. It cannot be found through medical testing or doctor's appointments or online research. Because health anxiety isn't actually about your health. It's about your relationship with uncertainty. And uncertainty is the core wound beneath all fear, isn't it? Because when you think you have a disease, when your mind races through worst-case scenarios, when you obsessively check symptoms and seek reassurance, what you're really seeking is the impossible, absolute certainty. You want someone to tell you with 100% confidence that you're fine, that nothing bad will happen, that you're safe forever. But no doctor can give you that, no test can provide that, no amount of research can deliver that kind of guarantee. And this is where the trap deepens. Because every time you seek reassurance and temporarily get it, you feel relief. But that relief teaches your subconscious mind the wrong lesson. It teaches your mind that the anxiety was justified, that the checking was necessary, that you were in danger and now you're safe. So the next time a symptom appears, your mind sounds an even louder alarm. This is the insidious cycle that keeps health anxiety alive. Not the symptoms themselves, but your response to them. And here's what most people don't realize: your subconscious mind cannot distinguish between a real threat and an imagined one. When you vividly imagine having cancer, when you feel the fear in your chest, when your heart races and your palms sweat, your body responds as if the threat is real. Your nervous system activates. Stress hormones flood your bloodstream. Your immune system becomes compromised. In other words, the fear of illness can actually make you feel ill. Not because you're manifesting disease, but because chronic anxiety produces real physical symptoms: muscle tension, digestive problems, headaches, fatigue, dizziness, chest tightness. And then what happens? You notice these symptoms, and they become new evidence for your fears. The cycle perpetuates itself. This is why fighting health anxiety with logic doesn't work, because you're not dealing with a logical problem. You're dealing with a deeply embedded subconscious pattern that was formed, most likely, long before you were consciously aware of it. For many people, health anxiety began in childhood. Perhaps you witnessed a loved one become seriously ill. Perhaps a parent was overly anxious about health and transmitted that anxiety to you. Perhaps you experienced a medical trauma or a frightening symptom that was never properly explained or resolved. These early experiences create neural pathways in your brain, associations between bodily sensations and danger, beliefs about vulnerability and safety. And once these pathways are established, they run automatically beneath the surface of your conscious awareness. This is why you can't simply think your way out of anxiety. You can't just decide to stop feeling afraid, because the pathways driving the response are neural, not rational. They exist in the architecture of your nervous system itself. And here's what makes this even more challenging. These pathways strengthen with use. Every time the pattern fires, every time the anxiety response activates, the connections become more established. Neuroscientists call this Hebbian learning neurons that fire together, wire together. So if you've been living with anxiety for years, you're not weak, you're not broken, you're simply carrying a nervous system that has learned, through repetition, to respond in a particular way. But here's where hope enters the picture. Because if the brain can wire these patterns in, it can also wire them out. Neuroplasticity works in both directions. The same adaptive capacity that created the anxiety response can be harnessed to create new responses, healthier patterns, more balanced pathways. This is not quick, it's not easy, and it doesn't happen through willpower alone. But it is possible. I've seen it happen countless times, people who've lived with crippling anxiety for decades who gradually, patiently rewire their nervous systems toward calm. The key is understanding that you're not fighting your mind, you're retraining your brain, you're not suppressing fear. You're building new neural pathways that offer alternative responses to the situations that once triggered panic. And this brings us to a crucial insight. Healing anxiety isn't about eliminating fear, it's about changing your relationship with it. It's about creating space between the stimulus and the response so that you have choice in how you react. When you understand the neuroscience, when you see that your anxiety is a learned pattern rather than an unchangeable truth, something shifts. The anxiety doesn't define you anymore. It becomes something you have, not something you are. And here's what's truly revolutionary about this understanding. Your brain's neuroplasticity means it's constantly rewiring itself based on what you practice. Every thought you think, every emotion you experience, every action you take is either strengthening old neural pathways or creating new ones. This is happening right now as you listen to these words. Your brain is forming connections, building understanding, creating possibilities that didn't exist moments ago. The anxious patterns you've been living with, they're strong because you've practiced them. Not because you chose to, but because circumstances triggered them repeatedly, and your brain, doing its job of efficiency, made those patterns automatic. But here's the empowering truth. What has been learned can be unlearned. What has been wired can be rewired. The same neuroplastic capacity that created your anxiety patterns can create patterns of calm, confidence, and inner peace. Think about learning to drive. Remember how overwhelming it felt at first? The constant vigilance, the mental exhaustion, the sense that you could never keep track of everything at once. Your nervous system was in overdrive, processing every detail consciously. But through repetition, those actions became automatic. Your brain created neural pathways that turned conscious effort into unconscious competence. Now you can drive while having a conversation, listening to music, thinking about your day. The same process works with emotional patterns. Right now, anxiety might feel automatic, like you have no choice in the matter. But through conscious practice, through deliberately choosing different thoughts and responses, you can create new automatic patterns. Patterns of breathing deeply when you feel tension rising. Patterns of questioning anxious thoughts rather than believing them. Patterns of returning to the present moment rather than projecting into an imagined future. Each time you make a different choice, you're weakening the old pathway and strengthening a new one. At first, it takes effort. The new path feels unfamiliar, uncomfortable even. The old pathway keeps calling you back because it's well-worn and familiar. But with consistent practice, something remarkable happens. The new pathway becomes stronger. The new response becomes easier. And one day, you realize that calm has become more automatic than anxiety. This is the quiet revolution that happens within you. Not through force, not through suppression, but through gentle, persistent redirection. You are not at war with your nervous system. You are re-educating it, one conscious breath at a time. And here's what many people miss about this process. Healing doesn't always feel like healing. There will be days when you practice every technique and still feel anxious. Days when you visualize peace and still experience panic. Days when you affirm your calm and still feel your heart racing. These are not signs of failure. These are signs that you are in the middle of the transformation. The caterpillar doesn't feel like it's becoming a butterfly while it's dissolving inside the cocoon. It probably feels like it's falling apart, but dissolution is part of the design. Your nervous system is recalibrating. Old patterns are being released. New pathways are being formed. And sometimes, that process brings temporary turbulence before it brings lasting peace. So when you have a difficult day, don't interpret it as evidence that nothing is working. Interpret it as evidence that something deep is shifting. The fact that you notice the anxiety, that you observe the pattern, that you choose a different response even when it feels hard, this is the work, this is the healing. You are not trying to reach some perfect state where you never feel anything uncomfortable. You are learning to hold all of your experiences with compassion, to meet your anxiety with curiosity instead of judgment, to say to your nervous system, I see you, I hear you, you're trying to protect me, thank you. And now, let me show you a different way. This is the language your body understands. Not criticism, not control, but collaboration, partnership, a gentle conversation between your conscious mind and your unconscious patterns. And as you continue this practice, something remarkable begins to happen. The gaps between anxious episodes grow longer, the intensity of each episode grows softer, and the recovery time grows shorter. You begin to notice that you can experience a stressful situation and return to baseline more quickly than before. This is your nervous system learning resilience. This is your body remembering its natural capacity for regulation. This is you reclaiming your peace, one moment at a time. And here's what nobody tells you about this process: it doesn't always feel like progress while it's happening. Some days, you'll use these techniques and feel immediate relief. The tightness in your chest will ease. The racing thoughts will slow. You'll feel like you've discovered magic. Other days, you'll try everything and still feel anxious. You'll breathe deeply and still feel tension. You'll challenge your thoughts and still feel worried. And you'll wonder if any of this actually works. Let me tell you something crucial. Those difficult days are not failures. They're part of the recalibration. Your nervous system has been running on high alert for so long that it doesn't trust safety yet. It's like a guard dog that's been protecting an empty house for years. Even when you tell it to relax, it keeps one eye open just in case. This is why consistency matters more than immediate results. Every time you practice these techniques, even when they don't seem to work, you're sending a message to your subconscious mind. We're safe now. We can handle this differently. There's another way. And your subconscious is listening. It's always listening. It might not respond immediately. It might test you. It might throw every anxious thought it's stored up at you, just to see if you really mean it. But if you keep showing up, if you keep practicing, if you keep choosing regulation over reaction, something shifts. I've seen this shift happen in people who were convinced they'd be anxious forever. People who'd tried everything and were about to give up. People who thought their nervous system was just broken beyond repair. And then one day, they noticed something different. Maybe it's that they drove past a place that used to trigger panic and barely noticed. Maybe it's that they had a stressful day but still slept through the night. Maybe it's that someone criticized them and they felt annoyed instead of devastated. These aren't dramatic transformations, they're quiet recalibrations. They're your nervous system, slowly learning that it doesn't have to protect you from everything, because you're learning to handle things as they come. This is the real work of healing anxiety, not eliminating every uncomfortable feeling, not achieving some permanent state of Zen-like calm, but building a nervous system that can flex with life's challenges instead of breaking under them. You're not trying to become someone who never feels anxious. You're becoming someone who knows what to do when anxiety shows up. Think of it this way. Most people treat anxiety like an enemy they need to defeat. They brace against it. They fight it. They exhaust themselves trying to push it away. And the harder they push, the stronger it becomes. Because resistance creates tension, and tension feeds anxiety. But what if you stopped treating it like an enemy? What if you started treating it like information? Anxiety isn't here to destroy you, it's here to tell you something. Sometimes it's telling you there's a genuine threat you need to address. Sometimes it's telling you you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, which is actually where growth happens. And sometimes it's just an old pattern firing off because your nervous system learned a long time ago to stay on high alert. The difference between someone who's controlled by anxiety and someone who manages it effectively isn't that one feels it and the other doesn't. It's that one has learned to respond instead of react. Reaction is automatic. It's your body taking over without your conscious input. Response is intentional. It's you choosing what comes next. And here's what most people don't realize. Every time you respond to anxiety with one of these techniques, you're not just managing that moment. You're literally rewiring your brain. You're teaching your nervous system a new pattern. You're proving to yourself that you can feel uncomfortable and still be okay. That you can face uncertainty without falling apart. This is the compound effect of nervous system regulation. The first time you use these tools, they might help a little. The 10th time, they work a bit better. The 100th time, your body starts to shift into calm almost automatically because you've built that neural pathway. You've trained your system to know that there's another way. And this matters because anxiety doesn't just affect how you feel in the moment, it affects every decision you make. It affects whether you speak up in that meeting or stay silent, whether you pursue that opportunity or play it safe, whether you show up authentically in your relationships or hide behind walls you've built for protection. The walls we build become our world. And here's the tragedy, most people don't even realize they're living behind them. They think the limitation they feel, the smallness of their life, is just reality. They've convinced themselves that this is just who they are. But I'm telling you, those walls aren't who you are. They're what you learn to believe about who you are. And anything learned can be unlearned. Your self-image has been controlling you like a thermostat controls temperature. When you try to rise above it, it pulls you back down. When you start to succeed beyond what it deems acceptable, it creates problems to restore you to your familiar level. It's not trying to hurt you, it's trying to keep you safe, keep you consistent with who it believes you to be. This is why people sabotage their own success. Why they find ways to lose the weight they worked so hard to lose. Why they unconsciously destroy relationships that could have been beautiful. Why they quit right before the breakthrough. The thermostat is just doing its job, maintaining the temperature you set years ago, probably when you were too young to know what you were doing. But now you know. Now you see the mechanism. And once you see it, you can change it. The question becomes, how do you actually reprogram this internal image? How do you override decades of conditioning and install a new operating system? This is where most self-help fails. It tells you to think positive. It tells you to affirm things you don't believe. It tells you to fake it till you make it. And none of that works because it doesn't address the actual structure of the self-image. Your self-image wasn't built with conscious thoughts. It was built with repeated experiences, emotional imprints, and unconscious conclusions. So that's what we have to work with. And here's what most people get wrong. They try to change their self-image by thinking positively while doing absolutely nothing different. They stand in front of a mirror and repeat, "I am confident," while their body language screams insecurity. They say, "I am successful," while their daily habits scream mediocrity. And then they wonder why nothing changes. Because your subconscious doesn't respond to words. It responds to consistency. It responds to evidence. It responds to what you actually do, day after day, until it becomes undeniable. Let me give you a practical framework. If you want to build a new self-image, you need 3 things working together. Consistent action, emotional reinforcement, and patience. Not 1, not 2, all 3. Let's start with consistent action. This is the foundation. You cannot think your way into a new self-image. You have to act your way into it. And the action doesn't have to be massive. In fact, it's better if it's not. Because massive action breeds massive resistance. Start small. Ridiculously small. If you see yourself as someone who never follows through, start by following through on one tiny promise to yourself every single day. Make your bed. Drink a glass of water first thing in the morning. Write 3 sentences in a journal. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you do it. Because every time you keep a promise to yourself, you're sending a signal to your subconscious. You're saying, I am someone who does what I say I'm going to do. And at first, your subconscious won't believe you. It'll dismiss it as a fluke. But after 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, the evidence starts to pile up, and your subconscious has to reconsider. This is how you build trust with yourself. Not through grand declarations. Through small, consistent actions that prove who you're becoming. And here's what nobody tells you about self-trust. It's the foundation of every other kind of trust. When you don't trust yourself, you become suspicious of everyone else's belief in you. Someone offers you an opportunity and you think, they don't really know what I'm capable of. Someone compliments you, and you dismiss it as politeness. Someone loves you, and you wonder when they'll discover the truth. But when you trust yourself, when you've built that relationship through kept promises and aligned actions, you can receive good things. You can accept opportunities without sabotaging them. You can let love in without waiting for the other shoe to drop. I've watched people transform their entire lives by focusing on one thing, doing what they said they would do, not for others, for themselves. The person who says, I'm going to write for 15 minutes today, and does it. The person who commits to one healthy meal and follows through. The person who decides to respond instead of react just once and manages it. These aren't Instagram-worthy moments. Nobody's going to applaud. But internally, everything shifts. Because you're no longer at war with yourself. You're no longer divided between the person who makes promises and the person who breaks them. You become whole. And from that wholeness, everything else becomes possible. The goals that seemed overwhelming become manageable because you trust yourself to take the steps. The relationships that felt complicated become simpler because you're not bringing internal chaos to them. The future that looked uncertain becomes something you can move toward with confidence because you know who's doing the moving. Your subconscious mind is watching, always. It's recording every promise kept and every promise broken. It's building a case for or against you. And the beautiful thing is, you get to decide which case gets built. Not through what you think, not through what you intend, through what you do. So start there. Start with the smallest promise you can keep. Start with something so manageable that failure isn't an option, because you're not trying to prove anything to anyone else. You're building evidence for yourself. Evidence that you are who you say you are. Evidence that your word means something. Evidence that you can trust yourself to show up. And once you start showing up for yourself consistently, something incredible happens. You stop chasing external validation. You stop waiting for permission from the world to be who you already are. Because your evidence is internal, your proof is personal, your validation comes from within. Let me tell you about a woman I once knew who had this habit of asking everyone around her for their opinion before making any decision. What do you think I should do? Does this sound like a good idea? Do you think I'm making a mistake? She was paralyzed by the need for consensus, terrified of making the wrong choice, constantly seeking reassurance from people who didn't have to live with the consequences of her decisions. But then she made a commitment. One decision, every single day, that she would make entirely on her own. No consultations, no second opinions, no polling the audience, just her intuition and her choice. The first few weeks were uncomfortable. She felt like she was walking without a safety net. What if she was wrong? What if she missed something important? But here's what she discovered. Most of her decisions turned out just fine. Some were brilliant. A few were mistakes. But all of them were hers. And with each decision she made independently, her confidence grew. Her trust in herself deepened. Her need for external approval diminished. Within 6 months she was a completely different person. Not because her circumstances had changed dramatically, but because her relationship with herself had transformed. She had become her own authority. This is what happens when you stop fragmenting your power by constantly looking outside yourself for answers that can only come from within. Your subconscious mind is the most sophisticated guidance system you will ever possess. It has access to wisdom that your conscious mind cannot comprehend. It sees patterns your rational thinking overlooks. It knows truths your logic cannot prove. But you have to trust it. You have to stop second-guessing every intuitive hit, every gut feeling, every inner knowing that doesn't come with a rational explanation. The world will always give you reasons to doubt yourself. People will question your choices. Critics will point out potential flaws. Fear will whisper warnings about everything that could go wrong. But when you have built that foundation of self-trust through consistent action, those external voices lose their power. Not because you become arrogant or closed to feedback, but because you know yourself, you trust your process, you have evidence of your own reliability. And that changes everything. Because when you trust yourself, you stop waiting for validation. You stop looking for signs that you're doing it right. You stop comparing your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20. You just keep building. One brick, one decision, one day, one promise kept to yourself. And over time, something extraordinary happens. Your internal world becomes so solid, so grounded, so unshakable, that the external chaos barely registers anymore. Someone cuts you off in traffic, your nervous system doesn't spike, because you've trained it to stay regulated. A friend cancels plans last minute, you don't spiral into self-doubt, because your worth isn't tied to other people's availability. A project doesn't go as planned, you pivot, you adapt, you learn, because failure is just feedback in your world now. This is what self-trust creates. Not perfection, not invincibility, but resilience. Real, deep, embodied resilience. The kind that doesn't come from positive affirmations or motivational videos. The kind that comes from having walked through fire and discovered you didn't burn, you forged. And here's what nobody tells you about this journey. It gets easier, not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. Your capacity expands, your tolerance for discomfort increases, your ability to hold complexity without collapsing into binary thinking matures. You start to see that most of what you worried about never happened, and the things that did happen, you handled them. Maybe not gracefully, maybe not perfectly, but you handled them. And each time you handle something, each time you show up for yourself when it would be easier not to, each time you choose the hard right over the easy wrong, you're making a deposit into the bank of self-trust, into the foundation of your character, into the story you'll tell yourself about who you are when things get difficult. And that story, that internal narrative, it becomes your greatest asset. Because when you believe in your own capacity to handle whatever comes, you stop playing defense with your life. You stop trying to avoid pain, avoid failure, avoid discomfort. You start playing offense. You take the risk. You have the conversation. You make the investment. You start the business. You end the relationship that's been draining you for years. Not because you're fearless, but because you've learned that you can feel the fear and function anyway. You've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the presence of action despite it. This is the transformation that happens when you stop waiting to feel ready and start acting your way into readiness. You discover that you're not building confidence and then taking action. You're building confidence by taking action. Every repetition, every attempt, every small win is adding another brick to the foundation of your self-belief. And here's what makes this so powerful. Once you understand this principle, you stop being paralyzed by big goals. You stop looking at the mountain and feeling overwhelmed. Instead, you start looking at the next step, just the next one, because you know that mountains aren't climbed in single leaps. They're climbed one step at a time, and each step makes you stronger for the next. I want you to think about the people in your life who you admire, the ones who seem naturally confident, naturally capable. I can almost guarantee you something about them: they weren't always that way. What you're seeing is the result of thousands of small actions they took when they didn't feel ready. What you're witnessing is accumulated competence, practiced courage, repeated readiness. They stumbled, they doubted. They had moments where they wanted to quit, but they kept showing up. They kept practicing. They kept taking the next small step. And eventually those steps added up to something that looks like natural talent to everyone else. But you'll know the truth now. You'll know it's not natural, it's built. Brick by brick. Action by action. Day by day. And the beautiful thing is, You can build the same thing in your own life, starting right now, starting with whatever small action you've been avoiding because you don't feel ready. That phone call, that conversation, that application, that first attempt at something new. You don't need to feel ready, you just need to take the first step. Because here's the secret that changes everything. The feeling of readiness doesn't come before the action. It comes during the action. It comes from the action. You start moving, and suddenly you realize you're more capable than you thought. You take the first step, and the second step becomes visible. You make the first attempt, and the second attempt becomes easier. This is how courage builds, not through one giant leap but through a series of small steps that teach you who you really are. Each action you take is a deposit in your confidence account. Each time you feel the fear and do it anyway, you strengthen the muscle of courage. I want you to understand something profound about faith and action. Faith without action is like a car without fuel. It might look impressive, but it's not going anywhere. Your subconscious mind responds to the commands you give it through your actions, not just your thoughts. When you act in faith, even when you're scared, you're telling your subconscious, I believe in the outcome so much that I'm willing to move toward it despite my current feelings. And here's what happens. Your subconscious responds to that signal. It begins to reorganize your internal world to match your external actions. The universe itself seems to respond to your commitment. Doors open, opportunities appear, people show up, not because of magic, but because your action has activated the creative forces within you. Think about the last time you did something brave. Maybe you had a difficult conversation you'd been avoiding. Maybe you applied for a position you didn't feel fully qualified for. Maybe you ended a relationship that was draining your spirit. In the moment before you acted, you probably felt intense fear. But the moment after you acted, something shifted. The fear didn't necessarily disappear, but your relationship to it changed. You realized, I can do hard things. That realization is priceless. It transforms your entire self-concept. You go from being someone who is paralyzed by fear to someone who acts despite fear. That's not a small shift, that's a fundamental transformation of identity. And with each act of courage, the next one becomes more accessible. Not easier, necessarily, you'll still feel the fear, but more accessible, because you have evidence now. You have proof that you can survive the discomfort, that you can act even when you're shaking, that you can trust yourself to handle whatever comes. The faith that moves mountains is built one stone at a time. Each small action is a stone. Each brave choice is a stone. Each moment you choose growth over comfort is another stone. Eventually, you look back and realize you've moved an entire mountain not through one supernatural event but through consistent, courageous action backed by unwavering faith in your inner power. Your subconscious mind doesn't recognize the difference between a giant leap and a tiny step forward, it only recognizes direction. And when you consistently move in the direction of your purpose, even incrementally, you activate a momentum that becomes unstoppable. This is the secret that separates those who transform their lives from those who remain trapped in cycles of wishful thinking. Consider the person who wants to write a book but feels paralyzed by the enormity of the task. They imagine they need weeks of uninterrupted time, perfect conditions, ideal inspiration, so they wait and wait. And the book remains unwritten, a ghost haunting their potential. But the person who understands this principle writes one paragraph. Just one. They don't judge it, don't perfectionate it into paralysis, they simply write. Tomorrow, another paragraph. Within a year, they have a manuscript. Within 2, a published work that touches thousands of lives. The difference wasn't talent. It wasn't opportunity. It was the willingness to make the small choice repeatedly, to trust that the accumulation of these choices would compound into something magnificent. And it always does, because this is a law as reliable as gravity. Consistent thought and action in harmony with your desire must produce corresponding results. Now, I want you to examine where in your life you've been waiting for the perfect moment, the ideal circumstances, the complete absence of fear. Because I'll tell you something liberating, that moment will never come. Fear doesn't disappear before you act, it disappears because you act. Confidence isn't the prerequisite for courage, it's the reward for it. Your subconscious mind is waiting for evidence that you're serious about this new identity you're claiming. Words alone won't convince it. Affirmations without corresponding action are like seeds scattered on concrete, they have nowhere to root. But when you speak your truth and then behave as though it's already real, You give your subconscious mind the proof it needs to reorganize your entire reality around this new blueprint. This is why the person who affirms abundance but refuses to tithe, donate, or invest in themselves remains stuck in scarcity. The subconscious doesn't distinguish between what you say and what you do, it synthesizes both into a singular message about who you really are. When there's dissonance between your words and your actions, your subconscious defaults to what you demonstrate through behavior, because action is the language of conviction. You can affirm health while reaching for cigarettes, but your deeper mind registers only the choice you made with your hands, not the words you spoke with your lips. This is why transformation always demands embodiment. You must become the person who already has what you desire, not through pretense but through authentic alignment. If you seek prosperity, you must practice generosity now with whatever you have. If you desire confidence, you must act with courage in small moments today, training your nervous system to recognize boldness as your natural state. If you want love, you must extend compassion and kindness freely, proving to your subconscious that you are already a vessel of the very thing you seek. Consider the student who affirms academic excellence but refuses to study, showing up unprepared to exams and dismissing the discipline required for mastery. His affirmations are empty rituals because his behavior broadcasts a different belief entirely, that success should come without effort, that results materialize from wishful thinking alone. The subconscious cannot reconcile these contradictions, and so it creates experiences that match the dominant pattern, repeated failure that confirms his unconscious conviction that he's not truly capable. Contrast this with the student who affirms her intelligence while simultaneously organizing her schedule, seeking tutors, practicing consistently, and approaching learning with curiosity rather than dread. Her words and actions form a coherent message. Her subconscious receives unified instructions and begins to rewire neural pathways, enhance focus, improve memory retention, and attract circumstances that support her academic goals. She becomes living proof that affirmation combined with aligned action creates inevitable transformation.